Hello, introduce myself. My name is Matt and I am the project officer working for Mendip Council on the Somerset Retrofit Accelerator project, focusing on two particular areas, one of which is the Somerset Green Open Homes events. And this is the possibly the last one that we'll be doing in this project. We've had 3 so far. And I just wanted to introduce Nikki from Frome Town Council, who was helping me today, overseeing chat and letting people in, and many other things, I'm sure. Right, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Yeah, Somerset Green Open Homes. Yeah, cool. Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. Always seems to be a nice, warm, sunny evening that we're up against when doing these events. So yeah, it's really great. And we will be recording it, so anyone that doesn't make it, they'll have the opportunity to watch it on the it'll be uploaded to the YouTube Somerset Retrofit Accelerator playlist hosted by Frome Town Council. Thank you very much. And we'll also be on our website, which will be launching soon. So other bits of housekeeping. Yeah, if you don't want to be recorded, then feel free to turn your camera off. And generally, I think everyone's pretty well prepped for Teams and Zoom calls these days, but please generally mute yourself unless you do want to talk. Questions, if you try, certainly during the presentation discussions, if you want to use the chat function for any questions, there will be opportunities to ask as well if you want to, and during after each sort of video as well. And yeah, feel free to use the little raise hand button as well. So the quick agenda, I'll just briefly introduce the Somerset Retrofit Accelerator project, what it's all about and the offerings. And then we'll talk to Murray from Taunton and his retrofitted house, is a terraced house. And then Terry, who's from Frome and looking at his house. And then Jenna, who is here from CSE, Centre for Sustainable Energy, and she'll be able to tell us some basics about retrofitting, what to look out for, and the offering of the future-proof retrofit plans. So the Somerset Retrofit Accelerator, well, what is it? It is a project, a partnership between the 4 district councils and Frome, Bruton, Glastonbury town councils, along with Somerset Independence Plus and the Sustainable Energy. It's a pilot project, and the aims are to basically try and kickstart the retrofit industry across Somerset. Retrofitting is basically trying to improve the existing housing stock in terms of energy efficiency. And there's a number of challenges that we face across Somerset. But how does this project help? What are we doing? Well, firstly, Jenna will talk about this later on, but we have, well, we don't have 50 left now, but originally we had 50 discounted home retrofit plans for Somerset households. It's a great way to, if you don't know where to start on your retrofitting journey, is to get a retrofit plan. Someone will come out and assess your property and produce a report. There are still some left. I'm not quite sure on the number now, but it's only worth taking advantage of it now if you can. So that's looking at households. Then we have 30 paid places on a Future-Proof Essentials course. So that's a course to help with the construction industry and getting more professionals into the retrofit industry. So it's a training course basically. And again, we're almost full on that now, but there are, I believe, still a few places left as well. The Green Open Homes, that's what we're doing now, and it's really looking at sharing knowledge and helping to sort of motivate householders to carry out works in their own home. And then finally, the other aspect that I've been looking at doing is the Green Directory. So that's we've basically got a website, a new website that will be launched soon, online resource, including Green Directory, where you hopefully will be able to find local contractors to carry out the different works that you're looking for, along with a general sort of guide and links for other resources and projects. And it'll include case studies from all the homes that we've had in our webinars so far. They'll all be on there, and links to the videos as well. We will go to our first Somerset Green home of the day, and that's Murray and Nicola and their Victorian mid-terrace home. What we'll do, we'll play Murray's video, and then we'll ask some questions after that.
How about this for a naturally lit stairwell? And there is the sun tube. So this is the sheep's wool that we use for insulating under our floors. It comes in rolls like this. It's very easy to use, nice and soft, and it is 75% sheep's wool and 25% recycled plastic bottles. What more could you want? There is a slight downside. It smells a bit sheepy to start with, but it wears off after a while, and we're very pleased with it, and nice and warm. Hopefully you can see the solar panels on the roof above the flags which were set up for the Jubilee. And the solar panels were installed as part of the new roof that was needed, and now give us lots of power in the sunshine. Here is the electric car charging point that has been put in the car. It's hard standing just in the garden of our house, and this car charging point has been installed after much discussion with planning authorities and the lawyers, but is now installed, and here's how you plug it in. That's it. Now I'm going to plug it into the car. Switch it to charging. And there's a special setting which is called Eco Plus with 2 leaves, and that enables it to charge up on pure sunshine. So when there's a nice sunny day like there is today and there's surplus electricity, we charge the car on pure sunshine. So why did we do all this?
What, all this work on the house?
Yes.
And all this disruption?
Well, a bit of disruption, yes. Well, the building work was a lot of disruption.
But why did we do it? Because it really mattered to me, certainly, that
to be sustainable.
Well, just to reduce our energy usage as much as possible, because everything that you do has got to start with you as an individual. You can't just think, oh, it's all going to be big measures. You've got to do your own individual bit.
And we also did use some environmentally friendly materials, didn't we, like paint and
yeah. I think it's really important if you're going to start doing the work because you want to improve reduce the amount of energy that's lost in the house, but also that everything that you then do is you're not contributing to more environmental disaster in a different way. So making sure that the paint doesn't contain, what are those things? Petrocarbons.
Yeah, hydrocarbons.
Making sure that the stuff to treat the joists, something like you did, isn't filling either us or the environment full of lots more chemicals.
Yes, there are fewer chemicals.
And then realising when you look round that there was a sort of inch gap around the front door and a gale blew through it, and that actually you could change the door and get it properly sealed around the edge.
Yes, we got new doors.
So new doors and new windows, which is disruptive and costs a lot. And I don't think it's going to, it doesn't save on the bills, but it certainly reduces our impact hugely, and that's what felt really important.
I reckon the energy that we've saved on with the solar panels helps to offset the cost, and also now that petrol costs £100 a tank, it must be better for
definitely that we can actually potentially charge the car completely off sunshine. But I think we did this because it was important to us, rather than for financial means. And that included when we needed a new roof because there was a hole in the roof, thinking, oh well, then we'll put solar panels on, and then also taking that opportunity to have the thickest insulation put in at the same time, and that's true. And making sure we then did the extension, the bathroom extension, as well as the main roof, so that and then we had internal insulation put on the bathroom walls, and suddenly the bathroom got several inches smaller than it was before, so that the door didn't fit. But actually just making all those, using the opportunity of needing to do one bit of work to make sure that we did everything else. As well.
No test.
Sorry for that. Thanks for that lovely video, lovely, well-edited video, Murray. Thank you.
Amateurly done, not for an Oscar.
I mean, you sent me this photo. Is this the bathroom?
Yes, this was to illustrate the point that Nicola made, that we wanted the insulation to be the maximum that was appropriate, and so we asked the architect to do that. And the extent of the thickness of the insulation meant that the bathroom door wouldn't open. And so the builder came up with a workaround to cut a hole in the roof area, and this is what the door looks like to enable it to open.
I see. Very good. So that leads on to my other question, that the internal wall insulation on the bathroom, that was a focus because it was sort of, you're in a terraced property and it's sticking out, so you've got a lot of external walls and therefore the coldest. Did you have any sort of damp issues, condensation?
Well, it is exposed on all three sides. I think it was so cold that I don't think anything else could think of entering the building, but it's now nice and warm.
Cool. And do you know what materials were used?
Well, I think the builders used the thick soft insulation that they provided. So in that case, we didn't get involved in it. When we did the floor, and that's when we got the sheep's wool. And
you did that yourself, the sheep's wool?
Well, yeah, I sourced the sheep's wool ourselves because we were keen to use some renewable materials and natural materials rather than the sort of chemicals and the processed things that you get in the main DIY shops.
Yeah, absolutely. And the windows, so you had new windows and doors. Obviously, they must be double glazed now. What were they like before?
Yeah, I mean, they were double glazed, but unfortunately, it seems that a lot of double glazing installers don't really fit the windows very well, and so they ended up with great big gaps and letting in a cold draft all through the winter. And so even though they were double glazed, they didn't actually do the job. So we've now got well fitted and wooden sash windows with double glazing.
Very good. And then looking on your roof, you said that, which is a really good thing in terms of retrofitting, you had an opportunity when you're installing a new roof that you added the solar PV. And I was just wondering how in practice and practical terms did that work? Were you able to use the same contractor or use the same scaffolding?
Yes, it all happened in parallel. The scaffolding was up for the roof and was also then used for the solar panels at the same time. And the roofer helpfully worked very closely with the solar panel installer, and so they worked out things like where the window goes in the roof, and the Velux window, that they could arrange the panels around it so that you get as many panels as you possibly can in the space available.
Yeah, that's really good that they work together. That's what we need. And in terms of your solar PV, do you get an income? Did you get the feed-in tariff when it was available?
Yes, we just missed the higher feed-in tariff, but because it took slightly longer than expected. But the summer income is about £250 a quarter, and then that goes down to about £60 a quarter in the winter. Yeah, so it's over 20 years, we'll be making money.
Yeah, right. My final question before we open it out. Is there any further plans on the cards?
I mean, there is the sort of exhaustion that we have to cope with as well. So I feel like leaving big gaps between each individual project so that we can recover from the last one. But there's a little bit more to do, and I'm waiting to hear Terry's session because we've drawn to a halt in doing any heating changes. We didn't think that the installation of air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps was possible, partly because of the space that we haven't got, and so that's where we've stopped at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it is a journey, and I think it's important that yeah, that it is done in stages, and what what budget allows and what the situation allows as well.
Yeah, so instead of putting in the heat source pumps, we just dress up in warm clothes and woolly hats, and then don't put the heating on.
Well, at least with all your sheep's insulation, you should hopefully stay a bit warmer in there. Cool, thank you. Nikki, is there any questions from the attendees?
Yeah, so we had a question from Joanna asking if the solar panels are sufficient for your energy needs as terraced house roofs can be small. Do you know kind of what percentage of your electricity demand you're generating at the moment? Yes,
we haven't yet invested in one of those very fancy meters that tells you absolutely everything, but it's sufficient for running the washing machine and dishwasher during the day, so we only put those on during the daytime, and so that all comes from the solar panels. And then you heard about the car charging, so that again is sufficient for charging the car if we put it on the special setting. The only things that the solar panels can't cope with is the energy needed for the cooker, induction cooker, which seems to take a lot of energy. So that's one thing that still needs more than just the solar panels.
Thanks. I had a question from Cara about whether you had the option to inset the solar panels into the roof to reduce the need for roof tiling when you got your roof redone.
I think this was done before these fancy options were available. So no, we didn't, and maybe that's for another day.
Fair enough.
In the last webinar, which is on the Somerset Retrofit Accelerator playlist, there's a lot of good discussion about solar and making the most of solar as well in terms of storage options. So yeah, if anyone hasn't watched that already, I'd recommend it. Any other questions?
Just had another one come through on the solar. Seems to be a hot topic. Just how many panels, kilowatts have you got?
Yeah, I think there are 11 panels, and they're fairly small, some of them, and it goes up to a few kilowatts, which, as I say, is enough to run those machines that we've got in the house, and also the 4.3 kilowatts that we use for the car charger. So it's of that sort of order. It's for sort of everyday things rather than very large electricity requirements.
Thanks, Mary. And another one, have you had any problems with the sun tube?
Well, we wonder whether we've got a problem with sun tube, because every now and then we can smell wet plaster, and we wonder whether it's just the sun tubes weren't sealed or fitted properly. But the actual functioning of the sun tubes is fine. It works really well. So no problems at all as far as that goes.
Great. I'll throw one in for me as well. We've kind of asked about kind of cost savings from the solar, but did you kind of get a sense of how much you might have been saving off the back of the insulation as well?
Well, as I say, we haven't put the heating on a lot, so we've saved a lot by doing that. But we've kept slightly warmer because of the insulation. So no, we haven't calculated how much we save, but I'm sure someone has, what you save from insulation. And apparently fewer than 50% of the homes in Britain are properly insulated. So we seem to have a long way to go.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you very much, Murray. Unless there's any other questions, then perhaps we'll go to the north east, if I'm right, to Frome, and we'll see Terry. Terry, are you with us?
I'm here. Yep.
Yeah. You've eaten your pasta.
I've had my tea.
Good. Cool. So we'll play your video first as well, and then we'll.
Apologies for the quality in advance.
No, it's all good. And then we've actually got quite a lot of photos. So if we play the video, and then perhaps if you can then talk us through the photos, yeah. And then we can do some questions after that.
Sure.
Hello, my name's Terry Pinto. I'm the architect and owner with my wife of 26C Milk Street, which is here. So it's part of a Victorian terrace, late 1800s. I've lived in it 10 years, 11 years, and it was a cold, drafty house, and I've done a full eco refurb on it. So externally doesn't look like much, but we replaced the front door and we replaced all the glazing with triple glazed aluminiums, as you can see, from Corsham Building Plastics. Ignore the name, but they're actually quite good glazing. Then we put a draft lobby on the house to stop all the heat escaping. So reintroduced a lobby into the house just to stop all the heat escaping. So shut the front door, and there's the lobby door into the house. What we've also done is this face here of the wall, we stripped the plaster back to the stone, and we put an additional layer of stud work with insulation on the internal face of the external walls, even here as well, just to give it the additional insulation. But what we did do is we left a gap between the insulation and the stone, so the building can breathe and we don't get condensation issues. With the floor, we put a new floor down, but that's neither here nor there. We had a suspended floor. So what we've done is we've put foil insulation under the floorboards and then put new floorboards down. So that's given insulation. Now the house isn't perfectly airtight, so we've kept our original open fire there. Because we insulated the house, the radiators for the air source heat pump are much, much smaller. So that's that there. We did remodel the house as well. So this used to be our kitchen in here and dining room. What we did is we just gutted that and we knocked, there was a single story extension which we knocked down and put our new kitchen there. Or we did come off gas and we've got an air source heat pump and all the extra gubbins that you need for an air source heat pump is here. So that's the tank there and that's the other tanks in there. So we needed some space, which is under the stairs. So we put it under the stairs for the additional tanks, and so we used that as storage. Sorry about flipping. So we've done that as storage under the stairs as well. This is the extension to the house, which is our kitchen now. This is all timber framed, and we put high levels of insulation on this that were in excess of building control, with a triple glazed roof light and triple glazed windows there. We've got a lovely wooden kitchen, but what we did do is try and reuse as much as possible in the house. So, you know, it's the original stair, and we didn't knock too many holes, so there's no structural holes knocked through from the living room into the dining room. This is the only structural steel that we have in the house by knocking through here. Again, we kept the construction mostly timber because that sequestrates carbon. And this is our air source heat pump here. We can see it's the Valent Aerotherm. We're not fully convinced this is it's as efficient as we hoped, but we've got a smart meter, so we should find out. And this is my lovely wife Paula, who put up with my designs on the house. So we've got, what we do have is part of the design is we've got a veranda here, so we can sit outside and enjoy the weather. And that's Betty the dog, sorry, that's Betty the dog there. And to maximise the levels, we put the veranda out, and then we've got some nice timber steps that come down into the garden. What we also did is, when we demolished the house, I kept things. So I was rummaging through and kept all the old bricks and the old quarry tiles that we took up, and we used them in the garden as well. So you can see the air source. I mean, my wife didn't like the look of the air source heat pump, so we put it behind a nice little timber louver there, and that still keeps it efficient there as well. We've still got a few bits to do. You can see there's a stone up there where the old soil vent pipe came out. We just need to do that. We couldn't afford to replace the top attic window, but that room is barely used and it's normally shut, so that was okay. But all other windows were replaced with triple glazed aluminium there. We tried to make the garden as natural as possible as well, so we've got a pond and it's all natural planting in there as well. And then other simple things is, we've got a water butt. When we did the house, I bought things on Facebook Marketplace. So the gutter, I bought off Marketplace. The taps in the kitchen, again, I bought a Marketplace. The sink, it's a polished concrete sink that's normally £500. I got that as a second for £50. So we did things like that. So that's just our toilet in here again. We've not fully finished the house, but so we just need to decorate it really. That's the last thing that's left. And what I would say is we're seeing how the air source heat pump works now, because we have a smart meter. And now we've got the smart meter, we can see we replaced also all the lighting with LED lighting, so it's all LED. And with a smart meter, when we put even all the lights on, it barely kicks in. So the things that really kick in are the air source heat pump and our induction hot cooker as well. So we're totally off gas. We have no gas at all. Hope that's it. And yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Terry, for your lovely little tour of your house. And yeah, you've done a lot of work. So let's find out a little bit more about the process.
So yeah, I mean, we were quite lucky because we had an inheritance because my wife's mother died, and we invested that in the house. When we bought the house, it was a local dodgy developer that did it up, and who was my landlady bought it off them. And me being in my job, I knew it was really badly built. So we knew if we were to do this house, it would be a full gutting, really, which is what we did. So it's totally new plumbing and totally new wiring and everything. But one of the things I want to do is improve the insulation, so on the external walls. But obviously, being in a conservation area, I'd have had grief if I wanted to put render on the front of the house, insulation on the outside. So the only solution was to put it on the inside. So what we did was we stripped all the plaster from the stonework back internally, back to the stone, and you can see there we put some stud in. It was a 100mm stud, 10 centimetre deep stud. And I know, like Murray used sheep's wool, but then there's the point that you noted, Murray, that you lose space, don't you? And so it was that balance, really. I would love to have used sheep's wool, but then it was that compromise of maintaining the space. So unfortunately, I did use EPS insulation that's foil backed. What you gain there, though, is the efficiency, and it's much more energy efficient. So we had a 100mm stud, then we put in 75mm of Celotex Recticel insulation, which left a 25mm air gap between the stone and the insulation, so the building could breathe out, the stone could breathe naturally, but we were still insulating the house. So the left-hand photo, you can see the stone stripped back and the stud work going up. That's actually our bedroom, that one. The second photo is our lobby, so you can see that we put the additional stud work in, but the left-hand wall, there was a degree of damp there because that was a gable wall, and the council had rendered that with cementitious render, so it couldn't breathe. So we had to tank internally on that wall. So you can see that grey strip at low level. That's where we had to tank it, and then we put the insulation on that afterwards. You can see the stud work for the lobby, and then the right-hand photo is our bedroom again, but you can see the principle of stud work, insulation, and then on top of that we put plasterboard there. That was the pro, and it was painful. It was painful. We did move out the house for 4 months. It was a contractor who I knew, and so it was it was mates rate. I'll be honest, we got mates rates on this, so I'm passing off work to a lot of the builders. So yeah, so I think that we've spent overall about 150. I think if that was normal, it would probably been 180. So we did spend a lot of money on it, but we have got a brand new bespoke oak kitchen and things like that.
And presumably you were the project manager for the house.
Yeah. Well, yes and no. So we did have a contractor who managed all the team. We paid for things direct, and then I had to do a bit of getting stroppy with some of the builders, come in and do that and whatever. But it was a bit of a mix, really, to be honest, Matthew, of between one member of the team and me and my wife. So I think in this photograph you can see even on the first one, the stair, we stripped again. You can see we stripped it back to the stone, and it looked so lovely. We wanted to keep it, You know, it looks so nice, but the principle of this project was to improve its carbon credentials and lower the bills. So however much I would have loved to have kept the stone, we did end up putting insulation and render on that wall as well. One of the issues we did have, the middle photo shows, we were let down on our windows initially. And so they were trying to hold back, and I said, no, carry on with all the insulation and the plaster work. And they weren't doing the reveals. And so you may see it on another photo. I asked them to put insulation on the reveals and the plaster work, but leave a gap of about 3 or 4 centimetres before the window, so they could take the old windows out and put the new windows in. Now, what that meant was we had a bit of a gap of stone that was unsightly for about 6-7 months until we got the triple glazed aluminium windows in. They put those in, and we still had that horrible gap. So what we did do is we put a bit more insulation in the gap, and then we put some MDF lining around the window frames to tidy up that gap there. And what you can see on the right hand photo, that's you could see the foil insulation that we put. So that it works on air gaps. I think it was developed from spacesuits, and I first used that 18-19 years ago on a house refurb in Nunny, and the building control officer didn't believe me that it worked. That was 19 years ago. He thought it was witchcraft, and now it's standard everywhere. This foil insulation is used everywhere. It's becoming ubiquitous. I think the energy used in producing it is probably not great, but what it gives you is great insulation values. That foil insulation is the equivalent of 200 millimeters, 20 centimeters of rock wool. You know, it's amazing. So where you're tight on space, that is really useful. So that just by putting that insulation in there, that brought us up to building regs. So we could see we had the original floor joists. We just stapled it on top, and then you had to staple it on the sides because it needs a minimum gap between the final finish of 25 millimeters. And then we just put our floorboards on top of that there. So our entire ground floor, we lifted all the floorboards up, put the insulation down, and there were some areas, what was the old kitchen, we had to replace the floor joists there because there was a couple of areas where they were historically just rotten. So we just made the decision to replace them all and have it done correctly. But we used the same insulation principle there, though. But even the extension floor, it was timber frame. So we just used that insulation. So we didn't have concrete, minimised the use of concrete. So the only concrete we had was for the pads for the foundations, and we had just one course of block work, I think, laid flat to get the foundation level, to get it level, so we could put our structural timbers on that. So that was all that there. Like Murray did, you know, he said putting natural daylight into spaces. It's one of the cheapest hits, and it's one of my as an architect, when I'm doing houses, if you spend more than 10 seconds in a room, we use that amazing light source called the sun. So I just put roof lights in, and they're just a godsend. They're one of the best tricks I use as an architect in refurbs, is just putting a roof light in, and you get natural ventilation. And then on the hot days, you open your roof light, and they're brilliant for ventilating it, and you get natural daylight in. So it really antagonises me when I go into a space and it's a bright sunny day and you've got your lights on. So yeah, I just put roof lights everywhere. So you can see the natural daylight in the back there. That's the shower room, and I put a roof light in there, and it transformed the room. The right-hand photo, so that's our existing loft, and that was our bedroom. It was always really cold in the winter, so we stripped it back, and again, I put 120 millimeters of EPS insulation between the rafters, and then I had 25mm of insulation under it, and then I put my plasterboard under that. But you know, we did the house in its entirety. We insulated everything that we could, practically that we could. We did it. We moved out the house so it could be done. So that was easy.
In terms of the insulation, do you? I mean, when did you finish it? Actually, is a question I should ask.
We've been in the house now for. We wasn't fully finished when we moved back. We moved back in about 1.5 years ago. I'd say practically the house was done about 1 year ago. Yeah, about 9 months. I think we had the triple glazed put in 9 months ago, actually. So the house was practically done 9 months ago.
But you've been through a winter in it, basically. So
we've been in through a winter, but that winter we had the rubbish UPVC windows in. So we would be sat where I'm sat now, and the curtains would be moving from the gale, and so yeah, the windows were one of the weakest things in the house. It's I really, I don't think I think you'll struggle to find a single architect that will willingly specify UPVC windows, because they may be lovely on day one, they may be fine for the first 2-3 years, but you never see well-performing UPVC windows after 10 years. They're, you know, whether there's condensation, they've warped a bit. They do come now with a steel frame inside them, but I still wouldn't want to specify UPVC, more from the fact also it's, you know, the hydrocarbons in producing it, whereas aluminium triple glazed, whilst it's energy intensive, I think it's something like 98% of the aluminium is recycled. So we're not, you know, whereas, yeah, UPVC uses oil products. So I wanted to avoid that like the plague, really. Oh, right, okay. So the top left photo is what it was like. So you could, there was actually the right-hand bit in the gap. There was a crappy little UPVC conservatory there. You can see where the blockwork's exposed. So that was ripped down. So we demolished, that was our bathroom downstairs, single skin blockwork bathroom. So there was great joy when that was demolished. But again, we took the bath out. It sat in the garden for 1 year. It was a steel bath. It had one small chip in it. Big deal. So we reused the bath. It's in our bedroom now. So we've got a lovely open plan first floor, which is our bedroom and our bathroom and our dressing room. And then the attic used to be our bedroom. And that's now converted into 2 rooms with a shared shower. So again, you know, we kept the sink from there and we reused that. So part of that, you know, I think is the eco refurb. It's I think it's that we didn't want to spend money stupidly, and part I think sustainability is reuse. You know, why buy brand new and everything and create more carbon when we had a perfectly adequate bathtub, and we just put all we did on that was buy new taps. Job done, you know. So yeah, I think so. The photo below the thing, you can see how it's all timber framed, even the floor there. So that was that, and then the steel where you can see the window and the door. That's where we banged the big hole in to create the steel. So the right-hand photo is where that window and door was. So that's the only, and I really don't like using steel work at all, you know. So that was the only steel that we had in the house, because it's high in energy. It's destructive when you put in steel work in. I have got loads of most of my projects are timber frame, and I use timber beams, you know, to create for the big apertures. But that was such a big aperture and was taking such a load that had to be steel. I had no choice there. You can see there that behind the steel beam, that's all the larch that we had. It's all English larch because of the disease that was there. So larch, I think it's not now, but it was relatively cheap, English larch, because of the disease. So we got a really good deal on larch, and so all the cladding on the extension was in larch. We were going to have exposed rafters in larch on the extension, but that was going to be more expensive to do in the end. But the builder, the carpenter that was doing it for me, there's a skill shop, had already ordered the beams. It didn't get my email, and I didn't have the heart to send it back. So we cut it down into the floorboards. So the entire ground floor that you saw in the photos, it's all solid larch, you know. So out of what could have been a disaster, we thought, well, why not? So we just got solid larch. And then the old floorboards that we took up, we used that for lining the bathroom, you know, walls and the shower area. So again, we didn't throw everything away. We kept loads of the old timber, and we used that architecturally upstairs in the house. So we got all the attic eaves doors into the storage in the eaves. The carpenters made doors out of the old floorboards, you know, and so that's part of the history of the house that we kept as well. So I like the fact that, you know, we, in our shower room, we've got our old kitchen floorboards lining the shower area and the bathtub.
Yeah, it's a very nice touch.
Yeah, yeah. I can, if I can put it on my phone, I might even take the computer up. I can show you all in a minute. So yeah, was that the last photo then, Matthew?
We've
Oh,
just
there we
got
go.
your
So
heat
yeah, we
pump.
go. So that's the air source heat pump there when it was installed. The one thing that I wasn't aware of, and I'm aware of now, is it throws a lot of condensate out, a lot of moisture. So basically, it's sucking all that air in and drawing the heat out of it. But also, for it to go into the system, it has to take any water vapor in it out of the air. And so there's a pipe that goes out behind that under the floor, and we've got a little gravel soakaway under that, and it does throw a lot of water out. So if you are having an air source heat pump, you just need to be aware you need somewhere for the condensate to go on that. Personally, I don't think it's ugly because it's signifying that we're doing something. I've been doing this as a so-called eco-architect now. Well, I joined the Environmental Design Association in 1989, and they all thought I was weird. You know, I think we need to signify that we're doing something about sustainability. So it may be ugly, but it's showing people that we're doing something. But my wife and my neighbours kicked off, so that's why we had that lovely cladding. This middle photo is, you can see, it's a symphony of copper. So because we got the house, so the left is the tank, the main tank, the valent tank, and the right hand side is an expansion vessel for that. But with the air source heat pump, it doesn't work on like a gas boiler. The water goes up to 90 degrees odd. Air source heat pumps, the temperature goes up to 50, 55 at most, but generally 48, 50 degrees. So your radiators don't get piping hot, but the principle is you leave them on a lot longer, so it heats the mass of the house up. So our heating's just on, and we control it via the thermostat. But what we have done, though, it's a much more smart system. So we've got a thermostat in the dining room, and that's where, because that's the one in our living room we've got the open fire, and the kitchen we've got the cooker. So the one space that doesn't have additional heat requirements is the dining room. So we put our thermostat there, and then because our first floor is just our bedroom and bathroom, we've got one thermostat there, and then we've got one thermostat in the attic bedroom. So the house is divided onto each floor, so we can set the temperature for each floor. And that's why there's 3 valves there in that middle photo you can see. But so I think with the thing about the air source heat pump is, though, it's just not like, oh, we're going to put an air source heat pump in. You know, it will only be worth it. This is where I got really, really cross with he is not being named. It was our lovely Prime Minister. He said, oh, we'll put air source heat pumps everywhere. You just don't do that. You know, you have, if you're in a house like this, a late 1800s house, you do have to insulate it. Because, I mean, the allegory that I always use with clients is if you had a tent and someone said, oh, great, I could put an air source heat pump into it, they'd have to put in something like a 20 kilowatt air source heat pump because all the heat's going to escape. But if you insulate the tent, instead of spending £40,000, you spend £15,000 because not as much heat is escaping. So yeah, so as part of this eco refurb, so I was saying, Murray, you've insulated the house. The next thing would be perhaps an air source heat pump, because you're not losing the energy from the house. And so the air source, so yeah, that was the principle of that. I was a bit hacked off with Valen, because when it was fitted, he said, "Oh, I've never seen. It's finally I've seen one fitted." So we were one of the first people in the UK to have this particular air source heat pump fitted. I used to do a lot of schools in about 15 years ago, and part of it was there to be energy efficient, and air source heat pumps were noisy and weren't as efficient as ground source heat pumps. So I would never have until 2 years ago, I wouldn't have specified an air source heat pump. But the problem with ground source heat pumps are they're much more expensive. Now, the efficiency of air source is so much better. It's only a few percentage points behind ground source heat pumps. And when they came to do their service on it, so it'd been running for about 8 months. If you have a gas boiler, when you get it brand new, for every kilowatt of energy you put in, you get about 0.9, 0.95 kilowatts. But after about, say, 5 years, that goes down to about 60% efficiency. But with the air source heat pump, when he looked at the figures, for every kilowatt of energy we put into it, we were getting back 3.5 kilowatts of energy. So I thought that was just from thin air. It just seems like witchcraft, really. So and as long as that's maintained, as long as we service that, like you'd service a boiler, that should stay at that efficiency of bringing 3.5 kilowatts back from 1 kilowatt of energy input. Our air source heat pump is a 5 kilowatt air source that we've got. So yeah. Then the right hand photo is the extension that we built, and when I built that, again, it was all timber, so it's less embodied energy, and we insulated that within 1 millimetre of its life. So that's even in excess of current building regs. The new building regs for insulation were increased about a month ago, but when this was built, this is still in excess of the current building regs. So I went overboard on the insulation, really, as much as I could. And again, we had lots of spare bits of timber, so we used it to make this lovely little veranda decking and steps. So, you know, as you can see on the left-hand photo, there was lots of timber stacked up, and me being me, I just, you know, I hoarded every single. I've still got a pile of MDF upstairs that I need to get rid of. So if anybody wants any, come to my house. There's a load of MDF going, and one floor joist going. But you know, I think as part of the sustainability thing, you don't, you know, make maximum use of every bit of material you've got. Was, you know, one of the principles I tried to do. So, you know, when the builders were chucking old lintels out or putting it in the fire to keep warm in the winter, I said, don't do that. I want that. And then, so I did do, actually. So you can see it up there. Oh, no, you can't. There, up there, sorry. That up there, that is the original lintel. Above, you can just about see it there. That's the original oak lintel that was above the old kitchen door. And, you know, and we reused as much as possible. It was, you know, I think it's that, yeah.
Brilliant.
Is that it, I think, on photos?
Yeah, I think so. I just wanted to ask about going back to the heat pump briefly.
Yeah.
I assume you had a gas boiler before. Were you able to use the radiators from that system?
It was brand new, everything, brand new radiator pipes, brand new plumbing, brand new radiators. When we got the air source heat, well, okay, because we got the RHI, so on ours, we paid 9.5 grand, and under the RHI, we got 7.5 grand back. I got mates rates on that. That should have been 12 grand. And we'd have got 7.5. So, you know, we've fundamentally we paid £3,000 for our air source heat pump, but what happens is they do the calculations for what each space, the BTU, the energy rating for each radiator had to be, or kilowatt, and they gave the rating for what every rad had to be in each location. So my existing rads, I didn't know what they were, but they were about what 18, 20 years old, and they were rubbish. They were the cheapest of the cheapest of the cheap, and they were massive, and they weren't very good. So we just binned them. And if you want to design a radiators, yes, we'd have had to pay a lot of money. All the radiators were the cheap ones that are from any old builders merchants, but they were the energy range. But because we'd insulated the house, each radiator was a lot smaller. It didn't need to be as big as if we had insulated the house. So again, that comes back to my allegory of the tent. If you insulate the tent, you need to put less energy in to keep you warm. But we did have brand new radiators everywhere. So the only place where I had a fancy pants one was in the kitchen, because we didn't have a space for a horizontal, so we had to have a vertical. And again, I bought that on Marketplace. It was a brand new radiator. They bought it. They didn't like the look of it. And it was fine for me. And it had the BTU rating I needed. So, instead of spending £400 on a radiator, I spent £70 on a radiator. And it was lovely. So, yeah.
Nice. You've got an eye for a bargain, that's for sure.
I have. Marketplace, it's brilliant.
Facebook. I've just started to sell things on that now.
Yeah.
Cool. That's brilliant. I'm sure there'll probably be some questions from everyone. So we'll go over and ask Nikki if there are any questions.
Thank you. Yeah, there's been a lot of chat. I'm just trying to pull out the questions specifically for Terry. Will the triple glazed aluminium windows also provide insulation from high temperatures?
To an extent, yes. I think, yes. If you can get some, we didn't specify the heat reflected glazing on ours. We did, but if you have the energy efficient glazing anyway, that has a degree. But what the thing I did specify on the windows, and I do it on every project, is night latches. So instead of having those horrible little trickle vents you get in the top of the window, it's the handle on the window. You can open it and lock it, and it has a gap all the way around. So what we could do is during the day, we could go out, leave it on the night latch, and the house will secure, but it will let the heat escape. And then at night, in those rooms that we weren't in, but we wanted to ventilate, we just put the windows on the night latch, and so there's a constant airflow. So it's about new windows just having night latches on, really.
Great, thanks, Terry. We've also got a question about the choice to have internal wall insulation rather than external.
That was more to do about planning, really. I mean, as an eco-architect, if I see the opportunity, I always advise people put the insulation on the outside. We're in a conservation area, and my bet noir is the Civic Society and the conservation officer. They I just genuinely don't, and they should know better, but they don't understand. They don't get sustainability. Their heritage comes first. So, and I do believe in heritage, and we have to care for it. So I would never have been allowed to put insulation on the outside on it, because it would have the conservation officer would have said no, and the planner would have said no. So that's why we had to put the insulation on the inside.
Yeah.
If I wasn't in the conservation area and it was appropriate for the building, I would have put the insulation on the outside.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. We also had a question about the budget that you mentioned. I think obviously that covered more than just the insulation measures. That was, including fitting a new kitchen and redoing the whole house,
rewiring the entire. Fundamentally, I think we've got, bar the external walls and the foundations and the roof and some of the internal walls, it's a brand new house fundamentally, I'd say.
Yeah. So you might not be able to do it off the top of your head, but in terms of just picking out the actual insulation measures
I think
out
if
of
we
that,
took,
do you know how
I'd
much
say
you'd be
off
looking at?
that then, let's say the extent. Okay, if we ignored the extension, that was about what, including the kitchen, that was about 60. That was about 60,000. So that means that's 90,000. I would say off that 90,000, our windows we paid 18,000 for the triple glazed aluminium. So that's 1, 2, 3 big sash effect windows, a big slider, a big door, and another small window, but all really energy efficient. So I'd say the insulation, about 25 on that, and then for the plumbing and the air source, I'd say that's another 20, 25. But then we've got 7,500 off that from the RHI. Now that's limited now to £5,000. And the last I talked, because I'm doing a very similar refurb on a house around the corner in Frome, and all the people that I talk to that do the grant saying get it in before November because it's going to run out. It's so frustrating as an obviously there are people here that will know more than me, but in my position it's like I can't see any long-term consistency. I think the government's changing the goalposts daily about what money you think they're giving away for it, and one of my gripes, everything I've done, I'm really fortunate because I had an inheritance, and it seems to me at the minute doing this is the preserve of middle-class people. If you are a cleaner that owns a house in Trinity, you don't have a hope in hell of doing a full eco refurb, and it's very frustrating for me. So when I do see clients, it's about finding what's right, and the first thing I always say is insulation. Spend your money on your insulation. If you do anything else, do your insulation. Still put in a gas boiler, just improve your insulation. That's the thing. So spend your money on the envelope of your house. New windows, new insulation. You can always change the boiler at a later date. You can always change to an air source heat pump at a later date. But if you've done your insulation, that will improve what you want. And then if you do put an air source heat pump in, you probably have to do fewer upgrades to ensure that you can do it.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. And I think Murray's just chipped in as well on the chat, saying it's undoubtedly easier to do more if you're gutting the house to start with, as you can do all the changes at once. But I think as Murray's done as well, if you kind of do things as you needed, you're refixing anyway, so you decided to kind of put the solar on.
Yeah, that's the only thing I haven't. There's only two. Well, there's one regret that I've had is I wish I'd done underfloor heating on the ground floor, and we didn't have the money for the PV. So I wish when we've got a bit more money, I'll put photovoltaic on, and all I need is 1 kilowatt to pay for the air source heat pump, really, and the cooker. I don't need a lot on mine, but my house, unfortunately, isn't orientated perfectly for PV panels, so I won't get the full efficiency of PV, but I will happily spend the money when I have it to do that. But the only regret I had is not putting underfloor heating on the ground floor.
Yeah. Thanks, Terry. Just running through to look at some other questions. Have you used thermal imaging to judge heat loss? I guess that could be to either of you, Barry or Terry.
I haven't, no. I think just because I was pretty anal when the builders were doing it, I know where the energy loss is through my house. So I think at the junctions of the first floor, there is an insulation there. But I think everywhere else, and I'm fairly I know where my heat. I know where the weak points are on my house, just because I'm experienced in it, though.
Oh, Murray, you're on mute.
We didn't use thermal imaging. We'd like to, but we did use our skin to tell where the draft was coming in.
Just as an aside, the Froome Share Shop has a thermal imaging camera you can rent.
It does. For anyone who is on Froome on the call. And I know other councils as well. I know Cara, there's some at South Somerset, I believe. I think it's always worth getting in touch with whoever your local council is to see if that's something that's available to people.
Yeah, and Glastonbury Town Council have got one too.
And if you're upgrading your phone, JCB do a mobile phone that has a thermal imaging camera on it.
Oh, wow.
I know. I know. Who knew?
Who knew? That's an energy geek's dream.
Yeah. It's a rubbish phone, though, so.
Great. I think that was the end of specific questions for Terry and Murray, but there is quite a lot of discussion going on in the chat, so I don't know if, Matt, how you want to run the next bit.
Well, I guess we can move on to Jenna and the presentation about retrofitting. I think there's a lot of alignments, obviously, with what Terry's just been saying as well. And then I guess if there are any more questions after that, then we can have more of a discussion.
Thanks.
Jenna, are you with us?
Yes, hello, I'm
Hello.
here. Hopefully you can all hear me.
Yep.
Are you going to do the slides, Matt, then?
Yes, I'll try and predict, but if I get it wrong, then just give me a nudge.
Okay, cool. So yeah, my name's Jenna. I work for the Centre for Sustainable Energy, and I'm here today with my Future-Proof hat on. So Future-Proof is a project that we are running, which is, well, I'll tell you a bit more about it later on in the presentation, but I'm going to just be talking generally about some of the principles around retrofitting. So taking a whole house fabric first approach, which we've already heard quite a bit about already. That was brilliant hearing your perspective on that, Terry, and we'd actually be really interested to chat to you afterwards, if that was all right. I'll get your contact details. Anyway, so yeah, talk a bit about understanding your home, and then a bit about finding contractors and advice online, and then finally talking about the way that we can help at Future-Proof. So the whole house approach is kind of a buzz phrase that is around in the world of retrofit. So it's this sort of approach was really taken in order to avoid some of the problems that there have been in the past, with particularly associated with government funding schemes, which have been sort of single measure approaches. So putting in insulation into the loft or into the cavity walls, or putting in a new boiler just on its own without thinking about the effect that might have on the rest of the property, and whether or not other measures could be done at the same time, or thinking about what measures might be done in the future. So taking a whole house approach is a way of making sure that you're considering the building as a system. So it considers the building fabric, the services, who lives in it, and where the house is, and also taking this approach means that you would look at your house as it is now, and whether there are any maintenance or repair issues you need to address first. That's really important before you start putting in any insulation in particular, or improving the air tightness, is making sure your home is already in a good condition. And yeah, so it's not just about energy efficiency, putting in insulation, putting in renewables. It's also about making sure that your home is ventilated properly. That's super important if you're improving the air tightness or the insulation. And I know Terry talked about putting in night latches, but my understanding is that doesn't actually meet with current building regs. So yeah, so we on the sort of projects that we're working on, which are funded by the government, then trickle vents are unfortunately specified, but yeah, so making sure that you ventilate your home properly is really important, so that you don't get problems with damp and mold in the walls.
Just a quick one, Jenna. I'm having that debate with the local building control on refurb as well. So
Yeah.
let's see how that one develops.
Cool, keep me updated. Yeah, and also sort of taking a whole house approach will help you to identify whether the things that you're putting into your home are going to cause problems in the future. I'm sure we've all heard the horror stories about sort of cavity wall insulation being put in inappropriately and causing problems later down the line. So those are exactly the sorts of things that you want to make sure that you avoid by making sure that you assess your home really thoroughly as it is now. Okay, next slide, please. So yeah, sort of twinned with this whole house approach is taking a fabric first approach. And again, Terry has already talked about this when he talked about insulation, which I absolutely agree with. And that is, yeah, making sure that your home has an even all-round insulation so that there's a consistent internal surface temperature as far as possible, particularly in older buildings that might have had things added to them later, so maybe they've had a loft conversion or they've had an extension which has got a different thermal performance to the older parts of the building, and then people wonder why they get condensation and mold in the older parts of the building. It's because it's a worse performing thermal part of the building. So that sort of thing is really important to consider. You're also aiming for an airtight building envelope with a continuous unbroken air barrier as much as possible. In reality, that's often quite difficult to achieve in retrofit. And then also you want, particularly in older houses, for it to have a vapor permeable construction, so that moisture can move in and out as it was intended to. So actually on the next slide, this is just to kind of show that you really need to understand your home, and the passage of moisture, it works very differently depending on how old your home is, the kinds of materials it was built from. So the first question is your home traditional or modern? And the sort of rough cut-off point for this is 1919. So homes that were built before that will have been built in a certain way, and they're sort of classed as being traditional. The kinds of materials that they were built with originally would have been intended to let moisture in and out of them freely. As you can see, their sort of diagram on the right there shows a traditional construction where there's moisture moving in and out of the walls freely, but there's also quite a lot of air gaps which were needed in order to sort of feed the fire and not suffocate the occupants, whereas more modern buildings are built to be airtight, so with an airtightness layer going all the way around, and with, think, gas central heating, where you don't need to have air supply, and then the ventilation is more controlled, so you've got fans and trickle vents and things like that. But of course it's not always that straightforward, because older buildings will have had changes made to them later on. We heard about cementitious render and mortar that's often put onto the outside of older buildings, and that can trap moisture inside. So the absolute best thing you can do, like what Terry did, was to take everything off and start from scratch, but that's often quite expensive, as we've heard about, and not necessarily always needed, depending on whether your wall is damp or not. Anyway, there's lots to say about that subject. But yeah, just to say, it's really important to understand what changes have been made to your house and at what point, and how that's affected the way that your house is performing, so perhaps differently to how it was intended. And maybe that's something that you need to address before thinking about retrofitting. Next slide. So just thought I'd mention some of the main sort of schemes that there are for finding contractors to do work. So Trustmark is a government endorsed quality scheme. You can find on there contractors to do all sorts of different work. The National Insulation Association is, again, a quality assurance scheme for insulation. So generally I'd recommend that if you having insulation installed, the installer is registered with the NIA. Same goes for any renewables. They absolutely should be registered with the MCS, Microgeneration Certification Scheme, and that is indeed, that's a requirement to get any government funding. And I also put on there the Green Register, which is a register of sustainable construction professionals, mostly focused in the southwest, but they do in theory sort of stretch across the whole of the UK. So that's a really good resource to check as well. Next slide, please. And then I've just put some other websites that I tend to use a lot up here, which I thought might be useful. I'll leave it up there for a second if you want to take a screen grab or take a photo or anything. So we've got the CSE advice pages. We've got lots of information on our website or about all sorts of different measures. Yeah, I won't go through all of those, but yeah, I would really recommend these websites. It's great resources. So just finally then to talk about Future-Proof. So Future-Proof was originally set up as a government funded project a few years ago. The funding ran out, so we're now a paying service, but we can offer you a variety of different services depending on what you need. So first one, introductory energy advice, that's generally just sort of over the phone, and then we would follow up with a written report. The most popular one is our full survey and coordinator plan, where we visit your home to carry out a survey, and then we send you a detailed retrofit plan. And there is a sample that you can have a look at on our website to see the information that you get from that. We can also offer inspection and project management if that's something you're interested in. And we can also offer referrals to installers for some measures, and contact details for builders. We cover the whole of Somerset. And as Matt mentioned earlier, there are some discounted surveys available. I'm very sorry, but the project manager is off at the moment, so I couldn't check how many are left. But there are some. So the sooner you get in there, the better. You can have a look on the Future-Proof website, and it will show you how much it is. The price depends on the size of your property as well. So yeah, that's our website, and I think Cara's put a link in the chat as well, and that's our phone number and email. And then on the next slide I've got my details, so do feel free to drop me an email or yeah, anything. Great. So if anyone's got any questions, I'd be happy to take those.
We've got a question from Joanna about whether there are other schemes outside of Somerset, or does CSE operate outside of Somerset, or other equivalent schemes in other areas?
Yeah, so we operate across a lot of the southwest. So we go as far as Wiltshire, South Gloss, Bristol, Baines, North Somerset. There are projects in other parts of the country, but it's very patchy. So people that are offering a similar thing to us. So there's some up north. There's some people powered retrofit up north in Manchester. There's one in Oxford. There's a couple in London. There's Plymouth as well. We've got one in Cornwall, but it's quite patchy. Yeah.
Thanks, Jenna. Just on the discounted plans, well, I remember, I think last time we checked in with Khan, there were about 7 left, so it might be less than that now. So it may be there are a few, but it's definitely worth kind of getting in there fast if you're in Somerset and interested. We've had a question from Thomas. There's a shortage of trained professionals in the southwest. Is there a shortage of trained professionals in the southwest to perform the retrofit work?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there really is. Yeah, I mean, this is something that's the Green Register are really focused on sort of the education side of things, and I know that there are people who are there are new retrofit courses that are being brought out, but yeah, it's definitely an issue at the moment.
Can I just interject very quickly there? Builders that I worked with 10 years ago, that we just do cavity construction. But they're doing a project for me now, 9 years later, and they're using the foil insulation and they're using timber frame. And I think slowly the general building profession is catching up. There's not enough of them, but finding a builder for love of money at the minute's the big one. If you can find a builder, educate them and get them to do the work.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah. So I didn't have any other questions unless anyone else has got anything specifically for Jenna in the chat.
Cool. Thanks, Jenna. Really good presentation. Really interesting, and a really good service that you offer. And thanks, Nikki, for doing the chat and the questions. We only have one slide left, which is just to say thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you to Murray and Terry for our homeowners today. Thanks for Jenna and Nikki as well. And yeah, thank you for everyone that comes, because it's all about you know, working together, getting momentum, and all taking actions ourselves. So that's really great. Just quickly, at some point, hopefully in your inboxes, unless you've opted out, we'll get in a little event evaluation email. It'd be great if you can respond to that. If you haven't already done so, if you want to watch this one again, it will be on a YouTube playlist, which you can, if you just search on YouTube Somerset Retrofit Accelerator, I think you should find it. It's on the Frome Town Council YouTube channel. This in theory is the last event, but feel free to get in touch if you would like to you know, get involved in something in the future. Always looking to do future projects. Obviously, sign up for a discounted retrofit plan if you are thinking about doing something to your home and you're not sure where to start. And also, just to add to the list of resources, in particular looking for local contractors, you can bookmark this website, because hopefully within 2 or 3 weeks it will be live, and is our Retrofit Somerset website, which is there. Cool, thank you everyone. I'm just going to stop sharing now.